I'm Matt Templeton. I'm a real estate advisor. Mason's a mortgage lender here in Texas. This is my friend and mortgage lender, Mason Whitehead with Churchill Mortgage. Today, we're going to be talking about investing in single-family homes in Texas. And so I've brought Mason on because he has some great content, some great knowledge on investing. He's an investor. I'm an investor. And we wanted to talk to our friends and our clients about this topic that everyone wants to know something about. How do I actually invest in real estate? How do I finally get started? Or what are the basics that I need to know? So I asked Mason to come on and answer some questions, tell us a little bit about investing and what are some of the lies that people are believing. What are some of the things? So Mason, feel free to introduce yourself if you want, or just jump into what we need to know. What do we need to know about how to think about investing in real estate in Texas?
Sure. We got Mason Whitehead, Churchill Mortgage. I've been lending for 20 years. I've been investing in real estate for over 15 years now, both residential and commercial. So one of the first things I tell people is if you're going to work with a real estate team and mortgage company on investing in real estate, make sure they have experience in it. So I know Matt does personally and his team does, and I do as well. So just make sure when you're going through this, you work with a great group of people in your sphere that are going to be able to support you and know what they're doing because they have experience in it. So it's one of the first steps is just building a great team around you to support you in this process. Most investors have a normal job. They don't do real estate for a living like Matt and I do. So I'm not a software engineer. If I need to develop software, I would call a software engineer and trust them in that process. So that's just really a big part of the first steps is just putting a team around you from an insurance agent, a real estate agent, a lender, a repair person, a handyman, painter, electrician, all those kind of people you want to have around you that you trust. That's one of the first things we teach is develop a great team to make the process better and easier for you and safer, of course.
What holds us back from investing? I hear people all the time say they want to invest. They might even know that we invest and they even maybe know other people that could be on their team to invest, but then they still don't move forward with it. What's holding us back?
Sure. Yeah, there's a lot of fears, as I poll people over the years about what keeps us from investing, what fears we're believing. There's kind of a main list I've come up with. Number one, people say, well, I don't have the money to invest. Because when you buy investment real estate, it's a higher down payment required. Your first time buying a real estate asset for yourself as a primary resident, you can get anywhere from 0 to 5% down. When you buy an investment property, you tend to need 20 to 25% down in most cases, which is a big chunk of money. So the offsetting truth of that is sometimes the first time you do this, you invest with friends or family. That's what I did. I put a group of people together, we all kicked in some money and we bought together. So that offsets the risk and the down payment required. Another fear is just losing money in general. Nobody wants to lose money. We worked hard for this and we don't want to lose it. What I tell people when I teach in these classes is that real estate over time is generally a safe investment. Now we're not talking about high risk, opportunistic, like jump in, buy now, sell 3 months later. That's not what we're doing here. We're talking about buying a good property in a good location and holding it for the long term. Long term being over 5 years. If you talk to people that have bought houses, before the 2008 financial crisis, well, you don't lose money unless you have to sell. So even if you bought a house in 2007, then you went through 2008-9, the quote unquote crash, if you held on to that house for 5 years or more, you did great. And if you still own it, you did really great. So real estate over time keeps you from losing money in most cases. Another part is people just don't know where to start. You start by educating yourself. Put that team around you, a great real estate agent, a great lender. There's some classes we teach you can sign up for to go through the process, to take out the complication. A lot of people say it seems too complicated to own real estate. It doesn't with a great team around you because that team supports you and helps you with those decisions. Another reason is just, I don't know about you, but I'd like to retire at some point. I've got a daughter who's going to be going to college in a few years. I'd like to make sure that we pay for that, or ideally have somebody else pay for that, not me. So we're just looking at ways we can basically prepare for retirement, have a good retirement, and maybe even pay for our kids' college expenses. So those are the things we want to do and address.
When you hit on the one about real estate over time is usually safe, I think that's one of the biggest myths that people believe. They think, well, if I buy them, what if it's cheaper next year? Or what if I need to sell and I lose money? And I've told people it's always true that if you're going to hold it for more than 10 years, you will always make money. For the last 40 years, if you've held it for 5 or more years, almost always make money. And then if you hold it for 3 years, in the last 10 years, if you've held it for a year, you made money, right? So depending on the time period, as long as you're planning on holding it for 3 years, 5 years, maybe even 10 years, there's really not a scenario where you don't make money. And usually it's a significant amount of money when we think about the different ways that you can make money off of real estate, whether it's through appreciation or cash flow or tax benefits. There's no wrong, even if you buy at a point where it might be a little bit higher than it's going to be next year. If you hold it for 3, 5, 10 years, you're going to be golden.
Any investment, any asset, you don't lose money unless you sell it, right? So over time, real estate is generally very, very safe, especially in Texas. I've got a chart with the actual appreciation rates in Texas. Over the last 10 years, your home values have doubled. And so even if you bought 3 years ago, like you said, or even a year ago, you made money and you're doing fine. Now you can't always promise that, but over time, real estate is generally very, very safe.
That's awesome. The other one that you mentioned, the other myth that I think a lot of people hear is the I don't have enough money. And
Right.
for a sound investment or for a good investment, there's always money available, whether it's
Right.
partnering with a friend or partnering with a professional investor, or even if it's finding hard money and then refinancing into something. Like there's lots of, obviously that's a little bit more of an advanced, complex path, but there are other options that allow you to find access to money. So we always want to advise people and help them find there is a way to get money to do this project if you find a good deal.
Right. One of the things we teach on that is, diversification is important, right? Like if you go to a financial advisor, they're going to talk to you about diversifying stocks and bonds and different investments, like, in retail and energy and different types of investments. Real estate's the same thing. So if all your retirement funds are focused on the stock market, then maybe you should look at diversifying that. I do a lot of my clients will actually take some money out of a 401k and invest it in real estate. And there's a good reason to do that, just based upon returns and leverage. Taking money out of a 401k, if you've got substantial investments in the retirement market, in their assets and things, taking some of that out, even if you have to pay a penalty to invest in a real estate property, may be a good financial investment as well. And we run the numbers and we take into account the tax hits you may take out of doing a withdrawal in that scenario. But in most cases, it still comes out in your interest to diversify and take advantage of real estate investing as well as part of your overall retirement strategy.
I'll add one more myth to your list, and that is that there aren't good deals out there. I hear people say all the time, well, all the good deals are taken, or all the good deals were in the last market or in the market before that. And if we're thinking about real estate as a long-term play, we know it's going to appreciate over time. And as long as you're holding it for the long run, you are going to make a significant amount of money. But the deals there's still deals to be made, and there's still money and equity to be made, even on the purchase. We're seeing all the time houses that are undervalued because maybe they need a little bit of renovation or cleaning up, or maybe we need to transform the property in some way. There are tons of good deals still going on out there. You may have to know how to search for them. And that's what we like to help people do, is if they say, hey, I'm thinking about investing, I'd like to invest, we can show you different paths to finding where the deals exist.
Yeah, I love ugly houses. Like, unfortunately, that company's name is already tagline, but like, a house that just needs some work is great for an investment. Now, again, I'm talking like not major structural health and safety issues, but if it's just ugly, it's amazing what paint and carpet will do for value and looks, without much cost. Or landscaping even. Don't be afraid of what may look a little bit rough now, because the potential upside is really, really great.
So the next thing I want to talk to you about, or question I want to ask you, like, what else can you tell us about advantages of building wealth through real estate?
Yeah, first of all, real estate is the #1 wealth creator for Americans nationwide, and it always has been, right? I mean, let's say always, at least in the last 100 years, right? One of the great lines I love that I teach in my class is from the LA Times. It says, owning your home doesn't make you wealthy, owning somebody else's does, right? So when you own real estate that people live in and pay you rent to live in, it's a big sign of wealth, because the IRS has a great statistic I pulled that says 71% of all Americans that showed $1 million or more of income on their tax returns in the last 50 years were invested in real estate. So 71% of people claiming $1 million or more, which most people define if you're making $1 million or more, that's wealthy, did it at least partially through real estate. Now, I'm not saying everybody should always just pursue and have the single mindset of being wealthy, but we all want to retire ideally. We all want to be comfortable and be able to give and do things and be a blessing to others. Well, a big part of the way people do that, for those people that are wealthy, is through real estate. So if you're not in real estate yet, we should look into getting into real estate, because it should be part of your overall plan to generate income and have passive income and to build wealth over time and be able to retire and pay for your kids' college and be a blessing to others and be able to give one day.
Well, and we've become such a society of consumption. So most of the time we're poo-pooing or talking negatively about wealth building while we're also just wasting the resources that have already been given to us. And so it's like, if we're talking about wasting resources or having too much resources, we might as well put it towards something that has longevity or has the ability to create additional funds in the future. And then we can use those for giving. We can use them for future investing. Like, just feels like good stewardship to not throw all of our money towards our own personal pleasures and consumption, right?
And then when you have tenants, I mean, there was times with some of my tenants over the years that they went through a hard time. Like during COVID, one of my tenants called me, his wife lost his job, And if you do real estate well, if you invest wisely, like we teach you to do, and you're not stretching yourself, you have the ability to be a blessing to other people. Like we helped that tenant for a couple of months of just reduced or no rent for a couple of months just to help them out, get them back stable, which they were super appreciative of. And they're great tenants, right? So you can be a blessing to others and be a real estate investor and not be a lot of people think of being a real estate investor and having properties. They have that slumlord mentality where, it's terrible places that run down. Like, that's not what we teach or do. We have great houses, well cared for, well maintained. When tenants need something, we take care of it right away. By doing that, your tenants value and appreciate you and pay rent on time, which is what you really want. You can do this well and be a blessing to others at the same time. It's a win-win.
That's awesome. Whenever I'm talking and teaching investing, I always tell people there's like 4 ways that you make money on real estate. And, it's like appreciation, cash flow, debt pay down, taxes. Like any thoughts you have on, and maybe we just need to stop and break those down for people, because it's, it's so easy to talk about some of these terms and like just throw them out.
Sure.
But a lot of people say, I don't know the language of real estate. Like what's the reason people invest? How do you get benefit from it?
Right. Well, yeah, education, again, big part of the investing is education. So most people, when they buy real estate, they're thinking of 2 things. They're thinking of, I want cash flow, which means, my mortgage payment's $1,500. I'm going to charge $2,000 in rent, so I'm making $500 a month. Cash flow. That's great. Now, I will say in the current market, your cash flow right now is generally negative for the first year or 2. I'm not talking it has to be like a lot of money negative, but your rent may be, a couple $100 less than the mortgage payment. So you have to expect that in the current market. But again, I teach all my investors, you have to have a long-term mindset, not a short-term mindset. For the first year or 2, you may have a slightly negative or break-even cash flow, but over time, it's going to get better and better as rental rates go up. Plan for the long term and not the short term. But also, you have to look at a global cash flow is what I call it. You may be $200 a month cash flow negative between rent and the mortgage, but part of that mortgage payment includes $200 or $300 of principal pay down. So you're not really negative in a global cash flow scheme. Maybe from a checkbook in and out standpoint you are for the first year or 2. But when you factor in how much you're paying down the principal every month as part of that mortgage payment and how much the house is appreciating over time, you're really coming out ahead. So as long as you have that long-term mindset, and you also keep in mind that reserves are super important. When you buy property, you should have good reserves and be able to cash flow property for a few months should something happen. If you do it wisely, plan for these things with a long-term mindset, it's great. There are huge tax advantages of owning real estate. I tell people all the time, even if you're not like super organized, the simplest way to do this is you have a checking account for every property with a debit card and a checkbook. Every expense for that property, use the debit or the checking account for that account. And that way, at the end of the year, when it comes time for tax time, you literally just take your printout of your statements for the year and hand them to your CPA or tax advisor. Super, super simple. But when you own a property, every time you drive to that property to meet the tenant, to do repairs, keep track of the mileage, you can write that off. Every expense for repairs, maintenance, leasing commissions, anything else you pay, keep track of, it's a write-off. Everything you do for that property is tax deductible. So at the end of the year, what you'll see is you have all the rental income plus all your expenses, which includes the mortgage interest, any repairs and maintenance, leasing commissions, marketing, advertising, anything you have to do for that property, landscaping, anything you do is a write-off. Plus, you get to depreciate the property over time. So I believe it's like a 27.5-year depreciation you get to do. So most rental properties on your tax returns show up as a negative cash flow, as a loss because of that, which offsets your ordinary income, which is a big reason a lot of wealthy people want to own real estate, is it is a tax benefit for them. They write off their income with a tax loss on their tax returns. Even if you're cash flow positive on the property, a lot of times and most times it's going to be a tax return negative and a loss because of the depreciation factor. So it's a big benefit of owning real estate and why so many people with high incomes want to own real estate, because it offsets their taxable income and there's a benefit to them.
Yeah, I on a couple thoughts, I completely agree. We always have like a single account for that property. I like to keep 4 months of reserves of what it's going to cost to operate that property, and I just don't touch that. I pretend like that money is not my money. It's the property's money. Separate checking account. Super easy to do taxes at the end of the year because of that. But also, one of the mistakes I made early on in my investing was I was so caught up in cash flow in year 1 that I wasn't thinking about that the rents were going to increase or that things were going to change over time or all the appreciation I was going to get. And it kept me from investing in things that were actually turned out to be amazing investments. Like 10 years later, I'm like, I wish I'd bought everything. Like what was I doing? Like I should have maxed out every opportunity I had to put money into investing in real estate, because I look back and they were just amazing investments and the cash flow would be incredible now. We sometimes have such a short-term view of, the break even right now, it doesn't make sense, but year 2, year 3, year 4, it just keeps going up. And by 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, it is a very fantastic investment. And like you said, the tax benefits are another piece there as well.
Yeah, in 5 years, in the last, I think it's been 6 or 7 years now since I bought one of my houses, and when I first bought it, we were negative a couple $100s a month. Now we're positive like $400 a month. So it's just over time. Take care of the house, take care of the property, screen good tenants, and it does work long term.
What else should we be thinking about? What are some of the other strategies that people might want to know about in order to consider or start to begin their investment journey?
So one of the most exciting things I enjoy teaching about is most of us have kids, right? So like I know, Matt, you've got kids, right? So would you like somebody else to pay for your kids' college?
100%. That would be, yeah. Like I'm even thinking, gosh, I should have started this sooner, right? My kids are already a certain age. Like, why have I not been working on this?
Not too late. You're just fine. But here's one of the great things about real estate investments. And again, time is your friend in this. Now, if you got older kids, we'll talk about that later. But let's say you have young kids right now. I'll just use my personal story as an example. My daughter was born remember I'm holding her as a baby, I'm holding her in my arms, and I'm reading one of Dave Ramsey's books about money management, right? So it's talking about college savings. I'm like, I've got a daughter, she's like 3 months old. 18 years from now, she's gonna go to college. I want to make sure we're ready. So I go to this calculator, this college savings calculator, and basically at the time it told me I needed to save $250 a month. Okay, that seemed reasonable. $250 a month every month for the next 18 years. College should be mostly paid for with certain assumptions in there. Well, so I started doing that, and that was great. But then one of my things, I always like to have a good plan B, right? Plan A is great, but plan B and sometimes plan C are necessary. What I did is we bought a rental property. Again, one of the first fears is I don't have enough cash to do it myself. So my best friend and I, we bought a rental property together. So it cost each of us down payment, closing costs, setting up the reserve account and everything, about $25,000. We buy this property together. We were able to put it on a short-term amortization, pay off a little bit faster, which is great. And fast forward now, my daughter's now in high school, looking at college, things like that. Between the appreciation of that property and the cash for that property, and we bought another one 2 years later. My daughter's college is paid for, and it cost me $25,000. Between the appreciation, the cash flow, the equity paid down by the tenants over the last 10 plus years, like by the time my daughter goes to school, I could either just sell the property and pay cash for her college, or do a cash out refi, keep the property, it'll still cash flow, and use that equity to pay for her college.
That seems like a much better process or much better way of paying for college than the traditional thoughts are like, just save your way to college. Like, why not let it do its own compounding inside of a great vehicle like real estate?
Right. Absolutely. So, buy 1 or 2 properties and have tenants pay the mortgage down. Property appreciates over time, and you can sell it or cash out refi and pay for your children's college. Now,
that's awesome.
That works great if your kids are young, but let's say your kids are older. Maybe they're middle school or high school already. I don't have that 15-year horizon to work with. That's okay. There's other ways to do it. You may have heard of house hacking. You see that online a lot, is house hacking. And a couple ways to house hack that we teach. Number 1, if your kid's going, so this just happened for one of my clients, for example. Kids going to school at UNT. So we buy a house near campus. The kid lives in there, and he rents out rooms to his friends. So the mortgage is more than paid for by renting out, it's a 3-bedroom house, rent out 2 of the rooms for X amount of dollars a month, which is cheaper than on campus, cheaper than an apartment, or maybe equal to an apartment, but they get a house and it's better, the yard and everything else. The mortgage is paid for. And more than that, because the other tenants in those 2 or 3 bedrooms that are being rented out are paying the entire mortgage. So really, your child lives rent-free in college, which saves you a ton of money on housing expense in college. So there's one option. Another option we just did with another client of mine. He calls me and says, "Hey Mason, my kid's going to college at UT. I want to buy a rental property down there for him to live in." I said, "Great." Now we've looked at some options and bigger down payments and all, which he's kind of like, I really don't want to come out of pocket that much. I said, "Well, hey, your son's 18 years old, or I think not 19 years old, right?" I said, "How's his credit score?" He said, "His credit score is great." I said, "Wonderful. How about we buy the house for him as his primary residence and you co-sign?" The son didn't have a job, didn't have any income, but he had good credit scores, which is all I need. So the son was my primary borrower. Mom and dad were my co-signers, which really had the income to support the loan. You get in for 5% down in that situation instead of 20-25% down for investment property, and they can still rent out rooms because it's his primary residence. That was a great way to do it. If your kids have good credit scores or old enough to sign a legal document, which is over 18 years old, that works just fine. Another way of getting it done.
When I bought my first property in New Mexico, where I was going to school and had family, I had family members co-sign with me. I think my 1099 income that year showed $6,000 or something. So it wasn't the income that was validating it. I mean, I think I felt like I had the money to pay rent, but it definitely didn't look that way in the IRS's eyes or in the the lender's eyes. But I had a good credit score. I had a co-signer, bought the property, got 3 roommates, basically paid more than paid the mortgage with my roommates. And so I was building equity in that property. Then I ended up keeping that property, rented out my room to somebody else, bought another one and did the same thing. And I started turning into the next house. I think 10 or 15, I guess I bought my house 14 years ago, my first house. I've done that so many times. I still house hack. My current house still has tenants or has friends that live in it, or, people that live in the back house or whatever else. I'm all about the lower down payment on the primary residence plus the cash flow of the relationships that you've got either living with you or living in a back house or living in an attached unit or whatever that is.
Yeah, it's one of the classes I just taught, this investor class in San Antonio, and we did this for the other way of doing this. What you just mentioned is take your current house, rent it out, and go buy a new primary residence. The benefit of that is let's say you've been in your current house for 3 or 4 years, your interest rate is lower and your cost basis is lower, which means it'll probably cash flow right away. That's what she did. She just said, "Hey, look, I'm going to rent out my current house." It cash flowed right away, and then she went out and bought a new primary residence for 5% down instead of 20% down. Now she's building a real estate portfolio, and it didn't require as much out of pocket. Now, the downside of that is you got to move, right? But a lot better financial advantages to that strategy of doing that version of house hacking as well.
Now, I think a lot of times people think about investing and they think of like home flippers or something like that. I like to think of that as like an active job where you can make some money if you want to make that your main focus. But really investing is using your money and allowing it to grow over time, like through a rental or through something that you're allowing appreciation to do the work. But of course, that is an option. And I like to rehab a property and then make it a rental. Any thoughts on just different strategies around whether it's buying short-term rentals or buying flips or like what else? Is there anything else, any other thoughts you have on like styles of investing in single family residential?
Of course. So, like especially early on, like I always say, keep it simple. If your first property you buy is the rental property, it should probably be relatively move-in ready. I mean, some minor TLC, paint, carpet, landscaping, those are easy things, no problem. Unless you are in the field. What I mean by in the field, I mean is if you're a contractor, if you're a handyman, that's your industry. So you know tools, repairs, you can do a lot of the stuff yourself. Then maybe you can consider a flip early on or a bigger project early on. But for most people, they have a normal day job. Remodeling things is not their skill set. Like for me, like I'm terrible with tools. You do not want to put a tool in my hand. It'll go badly for you and me. So keep it simple. A house readily move in ready, paint, carpet, little minor things are fine is what I recommend for the first house. Unless you've got that skill set and you can do the work yourself and you have the time to do it. Flipping, we've got really popular HGTV and all these shows about how you can make millions of dollars flipping houses, and it looks so easy on TV. The reality is those houses almost always go over budget and take longer to sell than you planned on. If you're going to flip houses, you have to have really good reserves and time to manage the process, oversee it, make sure it all goes well. Budget for the additional overages that you're going to experience on the budget, the things you didn't plan on once you get behind the walls. Flips can be a good thing. I don't recommend them unless that's your industry already, especially for your first couple of investments. Want to keep things simple. Single family home, good location, long-term lease. Now, short-term rentals have gotten hugely popular, especially since COVID, because everybody wanted out of their house, and so they all bought second homes places and rented them out. Those can be great. A second home, vacation home that you end up putting on Airbnb, VRBO, those kind of platforms are great. They do require a lot more money out of pocket because you not only have to buy the house, but you have to furnish it. You have to put not only furniture, beds and sheets and towels and plates and cups, all those things. So those are much higher investment deals as far as out-of-pocket money is concerned because you have to furnish the house and make it livable for people that want to stay there. Those can be great properties in great locations. You can definitely do that. You just have to be prepared for a lot more out-of-pocket expenditure on those and be prepared for that.
Yeah, we have several short-term and mid-term rentals. And I think I was buying stuff at the thrift store and other places to like make it and garage selling and whatnot. And I still spent $13,000-15,000 to outfit a home. So it can get expensive really quickly. And that cuts into, well, I've got to have this down payment or I have to have money to do renovations or whatever I need my cash for, plus that outfitting. So yeah, absolutely. It's a different investment, but you might be able to get your cash back faster. And in certain markets, it makes sense. So it just depends.
For sure.
Well, any final thoughts or anything else? I mean, we are definitely going to do this again. And I think we can keep digging into both more in-depth topics and going back to just the definition of terms and that sort of thing in future videos. But is there any final thoughts you have for us on investing or as we think about real estate investing in Texas?
Sure. The last thing I'll leave you with is everybody's biggest fear of real estate is the dreaded midnight phone call. I'm going to get a call from my tenant at 2 a.m. saying, the house is a mess, it's flooded, something like that. I'm going to knock on wood here. In all my years investing, I've never had that phone call. Part of it is just making sure we underwrite and choose good tenants, which I teach in my class as well. But here's the worst phone call I've had. It happened about 6 months ago. I'm sitting here at my desk. My tenant calls me. Now, side note, when your tenant calls you, it's never good news. It's just not usually that bad. Okay? They're not usually calling just to say, hey, I love the house. I'm going to send rent in early. That phone call doesn't happen. But tenant calls me like, okay, what happened? He calls and the first things out of his mouth is, Mason, the fire department's here, but the house is fine. Okay, explain. Right? The stove caught on fire. The stove caught on fire. Fire department shows up. They unplug the stove. It's an electric stove. They unplug the stove. Fire goes out. No big deal. First question I said is everybody okay? He's like, oh yeah, everybody's fine. Family's fine. House is fine. Stove's not fine. Stove is dead. Like, okay, no problem. Not a big deal. When a tenant calls me the problem, I don't go to the house. It's not a huge time thing for me. If he calls me the plumbing problem, I call my plumber. If he calls me the electrician problem, I call my electrician. Those people go out there, they schedule with him, they take care of it. It doesn't take a lot of time as an investor. But for this issue, literally, I go online to Lowe's or Home Depot, if you want to choose. I order a stove. It's delivered the next day. They haul away the old stove. It took me a grand total of like 20 minutes. It's not a big deal. The midnight phone call is not something you really should be concerned about. Maintain the house well. Take care of the house well. If a tenant says there's a problem, fix it well. Don't be a cheapskate. When the tenant sees that you take care of the property they're in, they'll take care of the property better they're in as well. And they'll be sure to pay on time. Don't be afraid of the dreaded midnight phone call. In my experience, it's not something you need to worry about in 15 years.
That's great advice. Well, we'll dig in more of this next time. If somebody wants to ask questions about qualifying for a mortgage, whether it's for their own primary residence or whether it's for an investment property, or just have more questions about how mortgages work, where can they find you? How can they contact you?
Simple. Churchill Mortgage, Texas. If you just Google Mason Whitehead Churchill Mortgage, you'll get my information. My cell phone's always available. It's 214-228-5794. I work all over the country, so if you're not in Texas and you get this and you still want to buy somewhere else, still love to help you. But love to help you and anybody I can take care of.
Awesome. And we'll put that information in the description, in the notes, in the comments as well. That way everyone can find that information pretty easily. Well, I'm Matt Templeton, real estate advisor in Texas and New Mexico. This is Mason Whitehead from Churchill Mortgage, talking to you about investing, the basics, and we hope to see you next time. Talk to you soon.
Thanks.